All right, so it's 12. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the May edition of Gardening in the Panhandle Live. Today we're going to cover all things herbs. Thank you for joining us. We've got a nice big crowd here today and a really good topic. We've got a good amount of questions here that you guys have submitted that we're going to do our best to get to. We've got a good audience too from all over the state of Florida. From the Western Panhandle and Pensacola all the way down Seminole County, Tampa, Sarasota. Very cool. Glad you're all with us. So I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists. We'll start. We got Mary Salinas up here. Mary, how are you doing today?
Great. Very
Awesome.
good. Thank you.
And we've got not a newcomer, but a guy we hadn't seen since 2020 on here, Trevor Hylton. Hey, Trevor, how are you?
I'm just right. Thanks.
Awesome. Glad to have Trevor with us today. And we've got Beth Bolles from way over in Escambia County. Hey, Beth.
Hey, glad to be here.
Awesome. And then stepping out from behind the scenes, normally Julie's running the show behind the scenes, but she's going to show up today. So we have Julie McConnell. Hey, Julie.
Hey, how you doing?
Awesome. Glad to have you with us today in person. So very good. We're going to get started. We've got a lot of questions and only an hour to get to everything we need to get to. So let's do it. So we have Tennessee on Facebook. Awesome. Thanks, Carrie. So first question, we have lots of folks asked a version of this, and we'll throw this to Mary Salinas. Mary, we know it's hot here. What are some herbs that tolerate the heat well here in Florida?
Well, there's a whole lot of them.
Okay.
Most of our herbs we can grow in the summer. Of course, one of the most common one is basil, and there's all kinds of different varieties of basil too. Not just the sweet basil, but there's Thai, there's purple, there's lemon basil, lime basil, cinnamon basil, all kinds of different ones. Chervil, chives do well, lemon balm, marjoram, mint, oregano. Of course, we have some perennials that, of course, can take summer heat, like rosemary and sage.
Lots of options, it sounds like.
Yes, lots of options.
And so maybe the better question is our second question here for Beth. You know, Beth, what are some herbs that don't grow real well here in the Panhandle? So Mary's told us there's lots that do. What doesn't? Are there any? Oh, I think.
Sorry, everyone. There's a few that we just aren't going to grow. Someone asked a little bit earlier, or asked one of our questions about nutmeg. We're really not going to grow the nutmeg tree. Trevor can talk about that a little bit later. We're not going to grow saffron here. It's just not the right climate. So any of those herbs that really like that cool weather and dry sometimes have issues. We can get by with a few of those in the winter. And then people still have trouble sometimes with the sage. You know, if we go through a really wet summer, it's not going to like it, as is with lavender. It's kind of a little bit tricky. We can still do it sometimes, but don't expect all herbs to perform every single year.
Gotcha. So a lot of those Mediterranean type herbs we're going to struggle with sometimes, it sounds like.
We do.
Okay. Good deal. So Trevor, this is a good question. And I know over there around you in Tallahassee, there's an awful lot of big, beautiful oaks and shade. So are there some good herbs that we can grow in shade? This person asking the question only gets a couple hours of sun a day.
What I find works well in shade for me are things like ginger, turmeric. Those will always like a lot of shade. There are some that will, you know, they like full sun, but they would still be okay in the shade. You know, I mean, your chives would still be, you know, pretty okay. And if you are getting into the late summer, your basils probably, you know, might not mind it, because then it would be a little bit cooler, so they won't bolt as quickly.
Okay, so you've got a couple of options, fewer options, but there's still a couple to grow there. That's awesome. Julie, I like this question a lot, and there were several folks that asked it. You know, container gardening is getting to be a big deal. So inside of a container, even in the ground, which herbs grow well together and mix together, and maybe some combinations we might want to avoid?
Okay. Well, really, if you just kind of go back to that Florida-friendly landscaping principle, right plant, right place, you want to group them together based on their needs.
Yeah.
If you put something, two plants together where one has high water needs and the other one doesn't like it wet, you're going to have problems. Somebody's not going to be happy. So some herbs that I've put together that have worked rather well are basil, stevia, parsley, variegated lemon thyme. All of those can take like a little less sun. I mean, they still need a lot of sun, but they can take some part shade situations, especially in the heat of the summer. Some of your ones that really like it kind of hot and dry, and not to say completely dry. I mean, they will need some amount of moisture, but your rosemary, oregano, fennel, dill, and sage, those are some that kind of can take it a little hotter, a little drier. So they will work well together.
Gotcha. Very good. Got some good options for you there for those of you growing in containers. Check out some of those combinations that Julie mentioned. Trevor, this is another question that we get a lot. So Julie just mentioned some things kind of related to this, but if you're going to grow herbs, is it better to grow in your native soil and amend it with organic matter, or do it in a container, or does it really matter?
Well, traditionally, herbs.
Or is it kind of an it depends?
Yeah, that's always the answer. Traditionally, herbs weren't cultivated. Herbs used to be gathered. So they are known for growing in the wild and even under real harsh conditions. So they're not like your vegetables that's going to be requiring the perfect condition, the perfect soil. So growing them in native soil, they would do real well. One of the things you don't want to do is love them to death.
Oh, so you're saying we can kind of kill herbs with kindness, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay. That may be why I struggle with herbs. So I'm used to a commercial production background, and we give them everything they need, and you can overlove them, it sounds like. Okay. Mary, what if you could pick only a couple of herbs that you'd say, like your herb power rankings for containers, what would be the best ones to grow in a pot?
Well, my number one
Whatever.
herb to grow in a pot would be any of the mints.
Okay.
Because they love to travel.
Okay.
And they will go everywhere.
Gotcha.
Mint will even grow out of your pot and into the surrounding soil if you let it, through above ground runners and the roots. So I would always keep mint in a pot. But a lot of your herbs do really well in pots. I like to keep my herbs mostly in pots so that I can keep them close by the back door and
there you
really go out there and harvest them. And I can then kind of move them back and forth between, more sun if it's cooler temperatures, or, put it a little bit more in the shade if it's getting really hot in the summer.
Gotcha. I know I've found even with my vegetable garden, I'm a lot more likely to use them when they're convenient. So that makes sense to me. Good deal. Julie, kind of like the question I just asked Mary, if you had to rank a couple of perennial herbs that a beginning herb gardener could do that do really well, what would be like some of your top perennials?
Honestly, I think rosemary is one of the easiest ones to grow.
Okay.
But I have to say that if you don't love it to death, it does not like a lot of water. You have to water it to get it established, just like anything else. And honestly, I really don't recommend them so much for containers, just because they get enormous.
Okay.
That little bitty plant that you get at the garden center that starts out 4 inches by 2 inches is going to be 3 to 4 feet by 3 to 4 feet and very woody very soon. It's an evergreen shrub. So that's very easy if you have a hot, dry location, as long as you give it the space. But it doesn't need a lot of maintenance at all.
All right. That's a good one. So Julie's number one perennial herb, try some rosemary. Let's try a quick question from the chat here. Linda Dunn asked, Mark kind of answered it, but I want to see what you guys think. We'll throw this to Beth. Beth, how about growing aloe? Have you grown aloe before?
Aloe's a great plant to grow. The key with aloe, we've had some outside for a long time. It's a beautiful flower as well. They do get large. You do have some some babies that show up that you can propagate and share. The key is a good, well-drained area with some sun. But aloe is a terrific plant for us to consider for neat interest in the herb garden.
Okay, and that has kind of a yellow, I mean, like an orange flower.
It's a beautiful orange spike that comes up that is really showy. So you're going to enjoy aloe, and it's easy to grow.
Awesome. There you go. Thank you. And so we'll stick with you, Beth, here for a couple of these. Beth's over there in Pensacola, so right there on the coast. So Beth, what herbs would grow pretty well in a coastal location with some salt spray possible?
Right. You know, we have to consider where the salt spray is. It direct salt spray. And if that's the case, we're not going to have as many of our herbs that are going to be tolerant of that kind of condition. So what you may do is offer some protection behind some shrubbery and grow a lot of these in containers. And then you can likely get away with a lot of our herbs that you would traditionally grow elsewhere. If it's really heavy salt spray, probably your culinary rosemary, is what's really going to tolerate that. Remember, there are some native rosemaries that are a little bit different. So when you look for rosemary, if you go to a native nursery, they could have different kinds that may not have that culinary use. So look, if you're wanting to use it, look for culinary rosemary.
Got some good salt spray tips there for you to avoid it and then to deal with it if you can't avoid it. So Beth, another question here. This is kind of a lesser known one, but a popular herb to buy for tea. So can you grow your own chamomile for making tea? I've never done that. Do you have any experience with that?
I do. I actually this winter bought some, and it's a nice little plant. It has little daisy-like flowers that are white with the yellow center. The problem with a lot of herbs is when you grab a magazine or a book, it often tells you to grow certain things in the summer months. And remember, our summer is so hot, it's wet, it's humid, that some of these herbs actually like our cool season better. So we can start the chamomile in the fall. You can also start it in winter. It handles a cold pretty well. I grew one in a container. And then what you do, unlike other herbs where we harvest the leaves, you're actually harvesting the flowers for that tea. So once that dew is dried, harvest your flowers, and you're going to need quite a bit. So get several plants if you're going to make some tea. But it's a nice little fragrant tea that you can make for yourself. I wouldn't make it for the whole dinner party, but maybe a little taste of it, unless you're really growing a lot of chamomile. It's going to reseed, so you probably will never have to buy that again. Just one last precaution. Some plants are called chamomile, but they're not, your true use for culinary purposes. So probably look for your English or German chamomile seeds or transplants, and you'll do just fine.
Okay, very cool. I knew nothing about that. I've been enlightened. Very good. Thanks, Beth. And finally, Beth, we'll let you get a rest after this question. Thyme is super popular. Is there a specific variety of the herb thyme that works better here than others, maybe?
Right. When we go to the store, we buy seeds. We often see things labeled as German or English thyme. That's going to be a little bit more of the upright type thymes that we can get. We're also going to see lemon thyme, which is outstanding. Julie mentioned that one. It's a wonderful plant. And then there's a variegated thyme, which sometimes isn't quite as tough. In certain situations, it might like that little break from some of the sun. When you get into thyme, though, you're going to find, and especially if you shop online, there are lots of hybrids. And when you start to get in the ones that are culinary, those are going to be about 12 to 18 inches in height. So they're a little bit more mounding. When you start looking in some of the magazines and see all these walkways with these beautiful small dwarf thymes, we can grow a few of those. But remember, harvesting tiny, tiny leaves is difficult. That would be more ornamental. And we're really not going to have luck with woolly thymes here. So it's going to be kind of a gimmick if you had a super dry spot, but our humidity is going to knock out those really hairy pubescent type thymes. So unless you just want to try a plant here or there, but don't go and buy a whole tray or, pots and pots and try to make a walkway out of the woolly thymes. So, stick with your more upright, shrubby, about 18 to 20 inches, and you're going to have good time for harvesting.
Have a good time with time.
You will.
I couldn't help it. Mary, I know that foraging has gotten to be kind of a big deal, looking around in the native areas for plants that you can eat, herbs. Are there any native herbs that are good to grow around here?
Well, all the herbs that we have been talking about are not native.
Okay.
As we talked about, most of them, many of them are from the Mediterranean region, but none of these are native. But there are many native plants that we can use. Some of them, like witch hazel, which is an astringent. We have yaupon, the native yaupon. You can harvest those leaves and make them into a tea. And there's
pretty good. I've had that before.
Yes, it's quite good. It has a little caffeine.
Yeah.
You want to just do it pretty lightly. There's even some young startup companies that are selling that. It's pretty good. Of course, we have elderberries that are native here. Sassafras that's been used, beverages for a long time. And I think we're going to post in the chat a publication from the University of Florida called 50 Common Native Plants that have been important in Florida's ethnobotanical history. So we do use a lot of our native plants. Probably not commonly though in an herb garden.
Okay, good to know. Got options if you want some native herbs there. Thanks, Mary. So Julie, I know your program there in Bay County has a pretty big ornamental, commercial landscaping focus. So what are some herb species that can kind of double as ornamentals in the landscape?
Well, I mentioned earlier rosemary, and I know I've seen that used successfully in parking lot islands, especially out in the Panama City Beach area, because they take it hot, dry, alkaline soils, little bit of
those tough conditions.
Yeah, I mean that's a bulletproof plant if you neglect it, if you don't love on it. Oregano, thymes, fennel is really nice, and there's a bronze fennel, which is has a gray foliage, and then there's the green fennel, which are also butterfly larval hosts. So we've used those for the ornamental value and also just to support our butterflies in our pollinator garden. Those are just a few, and even basil. I don't think. Well, Mary talked about basil. Even though it's an annual, that's something that you can mix into your garden, with other flowers or separately as an herb garden. Yeah.
In the wintertime, you see folks using the collards and ornamental kales, ornamental cabbage, things like that. So herbs too. That makes sense to me. Good deal. Yeah. Trevor, this is a question that we get a pretty good bit from herb growers. Will dill grow here in Florida in the summer? I know dill is very popular. Can we do it?
Well, dill's probably one of those that prefer the cooler climate. So
gotcha.
They're more like your parsleys, your cilantros, those type. They prefer growing in the cooler months.
Okay.
They don't transplant very well, because if you disturb the roots, you would probably shock them. So you have to be very careful when you plant those.
So if we grew them from seed, when would you recommend setting those seed out?
You'd probably have to do this probably in December so that you would have enough time to put them out in early spring.
Gotcha. Good deal. So dill is not a summer option for us here. Good to know. Kind of related to dill, Julie, are there you mentioned planting some herbs for butterflies. So which of those herbs do butterflies like to use as host plants, laying eggs, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so probably the big three are going to be fennel, dill, and parsley. All of those can support swallowtail butterfly larvae, which of course that means you're going to have caterpillars eating them. So plan to use them for culinary use, expect the butterflies to show up and to decimate them. Most of the time they'll flush back out and be fine. But I would say if you want it for yourself, plant extra, because if they find it, they're going to eat it.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's the problem with growing a pollinator garden, is sometimes it's going to look kind of ratty because they're going to snack on it a little bit, huh? So, all right. Beth, we talked a little bit about basil earlier, but we didn't get into specifics. Is there a particular kind of basil that you would recommend folks grow in containers?
The most popular basils are going to be the sweet basils, and there's lots of different selections of sweet basils, the Genovese, the mammoth, lettuce leaf. And, you know, for harvesting or for sandwiches and salads, people really like that. One we really like that's a little more compact and upright for a container that has delicious flavor are the column basil. You probably will have to buy seeds, and there's a nice one called Pesto Perpetuo. It's a little variegated color to it, but delicious flavor, and it's a genetic mutation of that column basil. The advantage is no flowers. You know, think of your sweet basil. You're always deadheading that basil in order to make sure that leaf has good flavor. So some of these column basils are not going to be the flower formers, or they'll be late in the year. So you're not constantly having to deadhead. So, you know, some of our local nurseries may have some of those specialty basils some year, but you often have to go online in the late winter or even fall because they sell out, and get some from some of our nice seed companies, and just start your own seeds so they're ready to go into your container garden once that weather's really good and warm.
Okay, good deal. Staying with you, Beth, here for a second. Another common herb, we're going to kind of dive into these individual herb species here for a few minutes. As far as sage goes, you know, there's all kinds of species of sage, salvias. Are they all edible, or is it just a specific variety that we can use as an herb?
Yeah, Daniel, how many species of salvia are there?
Lots.
Probably, yeah, lots, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah.
And, you know, when Julie was talking about some of these that landscapers use, we use salvias and sages all the time. It is a favorite ornamental plant in the landscape. Now, we know edible sage, Salvia officinalis, and that has the nice kind of light green silvery foliage. But again, it likes that little bit drier weather. It doesn't like our heat and humidity. So don't expect it to be perfect all the time. And it's not going to last years and years. You know, if you get a couple good years, then it's going to get kind of woody and you start over. But pineapple sage, that's a real popular one that gives you both butterflies and hummingbirds and has a nice sweet fragrance to it. We love that. There's kind of some iffy information about some of the native sages like Salvia coccinea. Sometimes you'll find things where people will use those leaves. Some people say, you know, I didn't feel so well after I consumed this. A lot of our salvias that may be really edible may be from another part of the state or another part of the world that we just don't grow here. So most of the other salvias that we grow that are edible would be maybe like your mealy cup sage, your Farinaceae. But we tend to think about salvias, instead of consuming them, more in the potpourri type mix. You know, grow your good old regular sage, your pineapple sage, and then consider maybe the potpourri with some of our more ornamental selections.
Good deal. Everything you could ever wanted to know about sages there. That's great. So Mary, this is a common question. So star anise, however you want to say it, the herb, is that the same plant as Florida anise, you know, our cute little one with the little red flower? What say you?
No, they're not the same.
Oh, dang.
And we do have two just fabulous native bushes. There's two different Florida anise, a yellow flowered one, and the more ornamental red flowered one. But they are not the same as the star anise. The star anise is a shrub from the same family, the same genus. but it originates in China, and it does then produce that star-shaped pod that's used in cooking.
Okay. Do you know if we can grow that here?
You know, I have never tried to grow that here. Anybody
Yeah.
else know that?
We'll have to do some more work on that. We'll get back to you on that one, but I don't know either. So that's a good question. But at least we know they're not the same species. So I appreciate that, Mary, clearing that up. I've gotten several folks ask me that before. Beth, you know, you shed some light on which variety of thyme is best earlier. So what, in your opinion, what variety of oregano is best? You know, it's used a lot in Italian cooking. And if you want to use it like that, which one would be best?
Yeah, luckily when you go to the nursery, you're going to find the common one that's really good for Italian kind of cuisine, and that's going to be Greek oregano. It has a really strong flavor. It grows well for us. You do need to harvest routinely, or you know it's going to get woody over time. So harvesting back kind of keeps some good fresh growth going. If you don't like the intense flavor of that Greek oregano, a little bit strong for you, there is actually a cross in that group that we do call a marjoram. It's not your true sweet marjoram, which likes a little bit of a cooler environment. This is actually a cross that is often sold as marjoram, and we'll put the names of those in the chat. I've kind of copied those so you can see, but that's going to be a little milder if you're not so intense on the Greek oregano. But even if you let those go to flower, pollinators will be all over them. So, you know, just grow it for that if you don't like it.
There you go. Julie, we kind of danced around this one earlier. Are there, you know, we've got concerns with native plants, native species all over the state of Florida. They come in all the time and cause issues. Are there any of these herbs that we've talked about that you should consider as invasive and stay away from?
No,
Okay.
none of the ones that we've talked about are invasive. Now, mint gets a bad reputation because it is a very fast grower and it can spread, but
Right.
it's not listed as an invasive species either by IFAS assessments or by any regulatory agency. You know, it's one of those things, it's just very opportunistic. So if you have good conditions for it, it will grow like crazy. But again, right plant, right place. You know, I have an area in my yard that is a little bit shady and a little bit damp, and I can't grow grass there. So I use it as a ground cover.
Okay.
It gets out of bounds, I just, you know, get it in check. So you just always match the right place. But none of the ones that we've talked about, I'm aware of as being considered invasive or any threat to native species.
Gotcha.
And if anyone else has any input. No, okay.
Sounds good. And I think Mark Tansik had put us down there in the chat, link to some of the IFAS invasive assessment. So if you have any concerns or questions, you can go ahead and ask them that on there. And Matt Lawler, just coming in the clutch with us here, he says, I think both star anise and our native anise perform similarly for culinary purposes. However, he grew star anise in Mariana, so here in Jackson County in the Panhandle, and it grew well and flowered in full sun. So thanks, Matt. There's your answer. You can grow star anise in the Panhandle. Very cool. Julie, I know you've got a little lavender farm actually going there in the Southport area in your county. So tell us, we know lavender's hard. We've already talked about that, but if we're going to try lavender, which variety would tend to do the best for us?
Well, the Spanish lavenders tend to do a little better in humid climates. Lavender is still going to be challenging. I'm not going to say it's easy. But yes, we do have a commercial lavender farm here in Bay County. And they are growing a couple of newer varieties of lavender. They have one called Phenomenal that they've been growing since 2018. And it has done well, phenomenal. And then they have another one that they're just starting called Sensational that they are hoping will even outperform that one. But it's just, I think this year, maybe last year was when they planted that one. So, you know, it'll have to go through some trial. But really some of the things with lavender is it's got to have good drainage. You cannot overwater it, and you have to have a lot of spacing between them for good airflow. And you also need to be able to to deadhead if you want flower production. So, you know, lavender is a little tricky. I don't know that I would do a really big investment in my landscape off the top of my head, but they are showing us that there's some new varieties out there that really might be good for Florida.
Excellent. So quick question, if you don't have that nice sandy soil like they do out there at Southern Grace that you mentioned, could you grow this in a container possibly where you can manipulate it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And one thing that I would definitely, you know, when you do a container garden, you want to use a potting mix. I would avoid the ones that have water saving technology in them with herbs. Because you don't want to overwater them. And so, yeah, I would probably go with something that had definitely really good drainage to do it. And they've actually done a little bit of trialing with some kind of coarser materials too than your standard potting mix.
Very cool. Let's see. Our next one, this is an interesting one from Trevor. Or for Trevor. Trevor, this person's interested in growing nutmeg or mace. I'm not even sure what mace is. Maybe you shed some light on that. It's difficult to find the plants, and I have questions about the viability of the tree growing in North Florida. So what could you tell us about nutmeg or mace?
I don't think, well, mace is that it's kind of like a latex thing on the outside shell of the nutmeg. It has similar flavor as the nutmeg itself.
Okay.
But I don't see nutmeg making it in North Florida at all. I just don't think that's possible.
So we're not tropical enough?
We're not tropical enough. And these are big trees that can get upwards of 50, 60 feet tall.
Wow. Okay, so that's not going to grow in our little herb container garden. So.
No.
Very cool. Thanks, Trevor. I had no clue. Very good. Mary, this is a really common question. I think this is an important one for lots of us that grow a vegetable garden. You know, it's kind of a natural thing to start including some herbs in there. And so what are some good companion herbs? This person asked for beans specifically, but just for a vegetable garden in general.
Well, first I'd like to start out with kind of an explanation of what is companion planting. And, you know, it's a practice that has developed over, you know, thousands of years where different plants are planted together for mutual benefit. And there's different circumstances for that. One is people have learned that you can plant certain things to draw pests away from your crop. Like you can plant sunflowers and they will attract, let's say, stink bugs away from your vegetable garden. You can also plant long season and short season plants together for benefit. So your short season plants are going to develop quickly and you're going to harvest them soon. Let's say something like radishes, while your longer season plants are still little and getting a hold. And also to make the best use of space. But specifically for beans, as far as I have ever work with beans, everything works with them except maybe onions. They don't seem to like to be planted near onions.
Okay.
But everything seems to work with them.
So as long as you've got as the growing conditions match what the veggies need, you can do that. Very good.
Yes.
Excellent. So we've been talking about just some general herb selection so far and some tips, and now we're going to move on to some growing techniques. And the first question here, we had several people ask a version of this question. I'll give this to Julie. Julie, hit on all of these. So what's the best, in your opinion, and you talked a little bit about this, the best soil mixture, just general for herbs, a fertilizer regime, and then container size for herb gardening?
Okay. Well, really with container gardening, you need to think about how big the plant's going to get and how big the roots are going to be and make sure you have adequate space for that. So, I mean, you can go as small or large as you need to, just depending on what herb you're going to use.
Okay.
And if you're going to combine them, of course, give enough space for all of them. I tend to not want to do really tall, deep pots, especially for herbs, because they tend to be pretty shallow rooted. If I do have a taller container, I might put something in the bottom that just kind of takes up some of that volume, so I don't have to buy as much potting soil and I have good drainage, like an upside down nursery pot or a milk jug that's just got air in it, some things like that take up some space. But you really, as long as you have good drainage, you can use just about anything. As far as the soil mixture, I usually just go with the cheapest potting mix I can find. I don't really go with anything too fancy or special because they don't have high fertilizer needs. You definitely don't need that water saving technology. But I would use a potting mix in a container just because that's what it's made for. And really just water and fertilize as needed. Some of your perennial herbs really wouldn't need much fertilizer. Your annuals like basil, would probably benefit from a light fertilization as needed.
So it sounds like heavy rates, not really on anything.
No, definitely less is always better. You can always add a little more of whether it's water or fertilizer if needed, but I would not go in heavy handed on anything.
Yeah, I think Trevor mentioned earlier, growing herbs is a totally different ballgame from vegetable gardening, and fertilizer is that way too with them, it sounds like. Okay, very good. Mary, this is a hot topic. I'm glad we've gotten to this one. The question from this Zoom listener are, give us some tips for harvesting and preserving herbs. So we've learned how to grow them. We know what to grow now. So how do we harvest and preserve them?
Well, you would want to harvest them as you want to use them.
Okay.
I think herbs are best used when they're fresh. I feel like they have a lot more flavor. So you want to harvest the tender new growth on the plants. And that does help them also to bush out and to keep growing if you do harvest it regularly. Now, when you're going to harvest in order to preserve your herbs, it's probably best to harvest in the morning after the dew has dried and they're fresh. They're not stressed from being out in the sun all day, and harvest them. And then you want to make sure that they get dried pretty soon, pretty quick. You also want to mostly harvest things before they start flowering. Let's say like basil, we've talked about basil flowering. Once it starts flowering, it's putting a lot of energy into those flowers, and maybe the leaves are not going to taste as flavorful. So, harvest before it goes to flower.
That makes sense.
Some of the tender leaf herbs that have a lot of moisture in them, like your mints, you want to bring them in and try to dry them quickly. Hang them upside down, dry them quick. Some of the drier herbs, let's say like rosemary, maybe you can hang it up outside for a little bit to start that drying, but then bring it in. You do want to make sure that they dry quickly so that you don't have a lot of moisture on there, and you start getting some growth on there that is favorable.
Yeah, we just want the leaf growth. We don't want things growing on the leaves, right?
Yes.
Good deal. Great tips there. Beth, this is a question that my dad actually asked me the other day. He's got a parsley plant in its second year, and different things are now happening. So the question is, I've grown parsley in a container, and this is the second or third year, not sure. Is it still edible after this long? And how long do herbs typically persist?
Wow, that varies widely. But with
Yeah.
parsley itself, we consider parsley kind of a biennial. We often plant it in the fall and kind of have that nice leaf growth through that first year. And then here we go, we're going to get a nice, really elongated stems and flower. Once we start getting that more elongated stems, you may start to get some bitterness into that plant. So for this person, it's not going to hurt. Take a leaf, try it, maybe chop and see if it's still edible, or if it's a little too bitter for you. But I think, like Mary mentioned, you really want to harvest these before that flower really gets going too far, and definitely before seeds are set for a lot of things. So parsley, just kind of plan to plant one every single fall. That way you'll always have some. And the best, for edible is that Italian flat leaf parsley. The curled leaf is very beautiful. So a really nice garden enhancement, and maybe to chop up if you can chop it up finely, but it's really more of the garnish, where the flat leaf is going to be used more for flavor.
Interesting. Very good. Did not know that. Trevor, this is another common one. Everybody likes this herb. It's used widely in cooking, but what's the key to growing cilantro? What would you tell people?
And I'm probably not the best person to talk about cilantro, because I'm one of those who hate cilantro.
Oh, yeah. I'm not a big cilantro eater either. Yeah. That's a love it or hate it type thing.
Yeah. But in starting, it's one of those plants that when you're transplanting, you don't want to disturb the roots to put the plant in shock. And then you don't want to overwater, just like most of your herbs. And again, they're not the type of herbs that's going to love being in real hot conditions. So after a while, you would start seeing them wilting under very high temperature. There is a Vietnamese cilantro, which is a member of the mint family, that does real well and
Really?
has pretty similar characteristics. However, it doesn't produce seeds. So.
And the seeds of cilantro are called?
Coriander.
Yeah. You get people sometimes that don't. I didn't always know that. That was fascinating when I found that out.
So yeah, there is that option that you could look at, and the Vietnamese cilantro will tolerate, real high temperatures.
Okay, that's interesting to know. I may have to try that in my yard. Very cool. Beth, kind of along the lines of cilantro and some of these other things we've talked about, this can be a quick answer if you want, but how and when would you harvest dill? Personally?
Yeah, so remember Trevor talked about planting dill more in the fall, and that it really likes a little bit more of our cool season. Right now it's flowering, and we love flowers because it attracts pollinators. And then guess what? It will drop oodles of seed. You never have to buy another dill seed in your life after that. But we're going to harvest it as soon as there's enough to harvest, if you're just using a sprig here or there. If you're going to really freeze it or use it some other way, you're going to harvest that as the flowers start to come on, but before it sets seed. You'll harvest that whole plant. And a good way to do it is, to maintain that flavor, is to freeze it. So like Mary talked about, it has to be dry, and then you can either freeze it in a water, like ice cubes, freeze it in the ice cube and then pop those out, put them in a freezer bag, and those are going to last years for you. And then some herbs, if you like it with an olive oil, you can kind of make a heavy paste and then freeze that paste, and then get a chunk out of the freezer when you want to add that to a dish, if your dish also needs like an oil with the herb as well. But dill's one of my favorites. I could eat dill all the time.
Awesome. Beth, we'll stay with you on this one. I actually really like this plant, the landscape. And it sounds like this person does too. The question is from a Zoom listener is, what is the best way to propagate African blue basil? In
the past several years, African blue has become the hit in the basil world.
It's awesome.
And remember, if you let your even sweet basil go, it gets kind of woody. Well, African blue is a cross of two different, one of which is a very large African basil that's a very woody plant. So you're looking at a plant that can be 3 feet, 4 feet, multi-stemmed, but we still typically call this an annual like other basils. Mine did come back after even this harsh winter, which was a huge shock. I didn't expect that at all, little pieces coming up, but it's going to have these really nice kind of purpley green flowers that all our native pollinators love and honeybees love, but there's no seed. And so how we have to grow this is we take some stem cuttings and just, you can put those in a perlite or a good well-drained soil mix of soil and perlite and propagate those to grow new roots. And guess what? You've got a new plant ready to go. So that's normally what you have to do as we get closer into fall, is make sure you take some stem cuttings and propagate those and hold those through the winter so that when it warms up again, you can put your African blue right back in the garden.
Yeah, and you want it there because, man, that thing is a showstopper. I really like that plant. Julie, we kind of talked around this a little bit, but there was lots of folks asking what happens to herbs if they start to grow flowers. You know, should you deadhead? And then is the bolting good for bees? Like or herbs bee attractors?
Yeah, so I think originally the question came in asking about basil, and I know Mary and Beth both touched on this. You know, as the plant starts putting energy into flowers and seed production, it does change the flavor of the foliage, and it is shifting all that energy into that. But, you know, it's okay to let them go, especially if you want them to reseed. Basil is really attractive to bees and butterflies and all kinds of insects. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll put basil out pretty early and I will pinch it, use it some, but I'll let it go ahead and flower and form seeds. And I'll have another crop of basil come up that summer, sometimes 2 or 3. And I can also save the seeds for the next year. So that's something to consider with several of our annual herbs, is just to go ahead and let the bugs have some fun and have more plants. But one thing with basil is it will cross-pollinate pretty easily. So if you're growing multiple types of basil in your garden and you plan to harvest the seed, I believe the recommendation is to place them about 150 feet apart. And that still wouldn't necessarily be foolproof, but just know if you're growing a lot of different varieties and you're going to harvest seed, you may have some surprises the next year.
Awesome. Very, very good. Mary, you know, we've talked about that herbs don't really have a lot of pests, but if they do, considering that they're typically edible and we're going to eat them fresh a lot of times, what can we do for pest control?
Well, as you said, Daniel, what's key is that because I think they're so strongly flavored, we don't get a whole lot of pests on our herbs. Julie talked about some of the butterflies that lay their eggs on herbs. Some people would call that a pest. But like Julie, I agree, just plant a little bit more so everybody has some in the end.
Okay.
Since you're going to be eating these herbs, of course, you don't want to use anything harsh. Anything that you would use, you need to read that label and make sure that it is labeled for use on whatever plant you're going to apply it to. But I would suggest, you know, things like, horticultural oils or neem oil or insecticidal soaps, something like that, is going to be a relatively soft pesticide.
Okay.
One thing that I have found that seemed to work pretty well if you're consistent with it, and that was a product that had like fermented garlic in it.
Interesting.
Can't remember the exact name of the product, but it was a garlic product, and you spray it on there, and you have to use it as a repellent. It doesn't do very well in killing insects that are there,
Sure.
or making them go away, but it will kind of give you a bit of a barrier and repellent quality to it.
Interesting.
And I've had a lot of luck with that.
Okay. There,
I
one
think
of our, go ahead, Mary.
Oh, and I think in the chat, they're going to put a link to a publication called Natural Products for Managing Landscape Pests in Florida. And it's got a lot of really good suggestions
Okay.
For managing pests softly, because there's a lot of people that are interested in that these days.
Sure. One of our faithful listeners, Clara Mullins from Tallahassee, sent in a question that's a legitimate pest issue, and I'll throw this out to the group, see what y'all think. She's having some flea beetle problems on herbs. So what might you do with flea beetles on herbs? I see Beth nodding your head, so you want to hit that one?
Yeah, flea beetles are a little tougher to control. You know, they have a little bit harder shell on their body. You could try some of the neem oils and see if that will work, the neem products. That may, as long as it's labeled for what you want for that edible, that may be the place to go. You know, a little shop vac may also work, just, you know, if you can carefully get in there. Sometimes that good old mechanical ways of taking care of things works just as easily as mixing up a spray and putting something out. But, you know, anytime we deal with beetles, that's a little bit tough insect to work with.
There you go. Thank you, though.
Beth, do you happen to know, sorry, a lot of your beetles as a defense mechanism, if you disturb them, they'll just drop down. Do you know if the flea beetles will do that?
I don't know if they do that. Yeah, but
I almost wonder if you could kind of shake them into a bucket of soapy water or something, maybe.
That's a great technique to give a try. Yeah, terrific advice.
Okay, very good. So Julie, glad you chimed in there because we're going to give you the next question here. Lots of people ask this, and I've actually messed up with this very badly before. Can rosemary be heavily pruned when it gets too big and very woody?
So I'm not sure what the real recommendation is on this. I just know what we have done in our own landscape, and we have cut them pretty heavy. You know, when you do renewal pruning, and we do have a link to a renewal pruning article, that's kind of one of those things you do with a little bit of crossing your fingers in faith, because some plants will tolerate it quite well and others will not. And sometimes you just don't know until you try it. So I know you could take them back by at least a third, maybe a half. If you go beyond a half, you're really rolling the dice.
I rolled it one time.
Rolled it, yeah. You know, I've seen some come back that I thought were dead, but I would probably not cut it back by probably keeping that third of a bush range and just kind of consider sometimes even something that looks, you know, and that's one of those, I called it an evergreen shrub earlier, and it's probably not really botanically correct. Yeah. You know, we use it that way, but it could be short-lived. You know, it could be something that you just figure you're going to get 3 to 5 years out of it, and then you might just have to replace it. If you want to give it a shot and cut it hard and see what happens, you can, but just know you might have to replace it.
Yeah, I mean, the one we had at the Walton County office had overgrown the spot it was in and just had to be cut back. Mm-hmm. And I cut it back past, like, really far back to where it was only 6 or 8 inches tall. There was no green foliage or anything left, and it did not come back.
Yeah.
So there, that makes sense to me because I did it. Thanks, Julie. Save some folks some heartache. We've got a question here that I just want to kind of pose to the group. I'm looking for some demonstration garden ideas and places to visit that have a nice herb and culinary garden. So do you guys know of any locally here in the Panhandle where folks could go get some ideas?
Well, I would vote for Beth's garden there at Escambia County Extension.
For sure.
A fabulous herb garden.
Thank you, Mary. We have a new team that's taken that on. And, you know, some of the plants, like Trevor mentioned, we have the Vietnamese cilantro, what is it, Goya Hoya? Goya Hutu. I just see some of these, I don't even know what they have in there. But, you know, we have the traditional ones, and then we're trying some that are a little bit different. And we've got a great team of master gardeners who keep that rolling.
Awesome. Looks like Mark has some at Mark and Trevor over there at the Leon County Extension Office Demonstration Garden have a few. So that's an option for those of you who are in the Tallahassee area. Any others from the panel?
Well, we mentioned earlier the Southern Grace Lavender Farm in
Oh,
Bay
yeah.
County. Now, of course, they're obviously focused on lavender, but it's really interesting to see how they're growing it, and
Sure.
they'll happily share information about how they're doing it and the methods they're using. And at our office, we also, we kind of intersperse a lot of our herbs in with our ornamental plantings, but we also have a really neat kind of centerpiece at our office that's a spiral herb garden that is
Interesting.
built in a spiral form, and then the herbs are placed on it based on their sunlight and water needs, that one of my master gardener volunteers designed, and they
Okay.
made here at my office in Panama
Very
City.
cool. Well, there's you 3 or 4 options right there, all over the Panhandle. So everybody, if you're the west or the east or in the middle, you've got a spot to go check out. We've got 2 questions left. So we got 5 minutes, 2 questions. So if y'all hang with us for a few more minutes, we'll get finished up here. Trevor, so this person's growing herbs from seeds, and they get the seeds to sprout and start to grow, but they always end up dying. So how would you offer some advice to this person to get a herb from a seed to a full plant?
I would say just about like anything else, you know, you want to start with a good growing medium, and if you're going to start from seed, because you could have a lot of damping off problems when you just use native soil. You should also watch the amount of water you're giving to these new seedlings when they're starting out. So that too can be a major problem that you're going to be having if you overwater these. And one of the things that could help you sometimes is soaking your seeds overnight before you plant them. That would give you a jump start on their germination.
Okay, so there's some good tips to help your seeds grow. Good job, Trevor. Thank you. And our last question that we're going to get to here, and then we'll make a couple of housekeeping announcements and let y'all get on to the rest of your day. Julie, you talked about mint a little earlier. How would you recommend keeping mint from getting leggy in a pot?
Really is, well, if it's in a pot, you might need to rotate it for sunlight, because it could be that it's getting a little more sunlight on one side than another. Another thing is just harvesting it or pruning it. You know, a lot of these herbs, I think Mary mentioned earlier that when you're harvesting, which is basically you're, pinching off parts of the plant or you're cutting off parts of the plant, when you tip prune, you stimulate new growth. And so you can actually make it bushier or make it fuller by pruning off the tips of where you want it to fill out. But in a container, it could be that it's kind of stretching towards the sunlight. It might not be enough sun. So that's something to look at. But if nothing else, you can do a pretty hard pruning. My husband will take the weed eater to the mint in my garden sometimes, and it takes it just fine.
Yeah, good. Mark Tansig says, when life gives you leggy mint, make mojitos. There you go. I like the way Mark thinks. Very good. So that is our herb discussion for the day. I appreciate all of you being here. We want to go ahead and advertise for our next edition. It's going to be on June the 10th on a Thursday again, and we're going to talk about ornamental and turf diseases. So if you've ever had any disease issues in your grass or in your landscape, you'll definitely want to tune in. Our special guest is going to be Dr. Phil Harmon, a professor of plant pathology at the University of Florida. I know Phil personally. He's a really interesting guy, super smart, very relatable. I think y'all are going to really enjoy that one. And we'll have a group of agents on here as well to help with that. But definitely tune in there on June the 10th. And if you like what we've been doing here and would like to help us do a better job and continue to offer interesting Gardening in the Panhandle live webinars, please take our survey. Matt Lawler just posted in the chat to let us know what you thought of today's session and what we can do better going forward. We really appreciate your feedback, and it helps us do a better job in the future. So with that, we'll close us out. So thank you to Julie, Trevor, Beth, and Mary for being excellent panelists today, and we hope to see y'all again soon in the future back with us. A special thanks to the folks that make this go round: Matt Lawler, Carrie Stevenson, and Mark Tansig behind the scenes, making it making it all go there in the chat on Facebook and here on Zoom. So I appreciate all of you joining today, and we'll see y'all back in June for ornamental and turf diseases. And until then, y'all have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you.